to the official website of the Stanley Parable 2. A sequel, huh? Watch our helpful and informative video to learn more about the Stanley Parable and what the journey of becoming a sequel is all about. There's a direct YouTube link. That's new. There we go. I don't understand why it's not full screening.
Say there, Timmy. What's that you're enjoying? Why, it's breakfast, of course. Everyone loves breakfast. But did you know that breakfast is getting a sequel? That's right. It's called Lunch. And critics are raving that lunch will be everything breakfast was and more. With a little luck, we may even get a trilogy series out of it. Say, you know what a sequel is, don't you, Timmy? Why, sequels are the world's way of clinging helplessly to the past. We all want more of the things we love, and we're all afraid of change, which is what makes sequels so popular. New ideas are dangerous, Timmy, and they can lead to early aging. This eager-minded young thinker is just 29 years old. That's why we have sequels, to keep us couched in the familiar and the comfortable. Sequels are the bedrock of a healthy, functional society. And if you look around you, you'll find them everywhere you go. For instance, this man is developing a sequel to the automobile, which we'll call the vertical automobile. It's a useless, impractical invention, and in 2 days' time, the man will be publicly stoned to death for his crimes against gravity. Not all sequels are heretical nonsense, however. Here's the man who invented breathing, which is the sequel to suffocating and dying a slow death. Even your parents are getting a sequel, Timmy. Their names are Rob and Jessica, and they'll be taking care of you once your original parents are sent back in time to fight a secret war for the government. Sequels can be very fashionable. This young woman is wearing 5 shirts at once, which is the sequel to wearing 4 shirts at once. Look at Becky over there, wearing only 2 shirts at once. Get with the times, Becky. In fact, there is only one single thing in the world that isn't a sequel. It's this. We don't know what it is or why it exists, but it's the prequel from which all sequels are derived. And just like everything else, the Stanley Parable is getting a sequel too. We all know, of course, that it was your favorite game as a child. Don't you remember those long, lazy afternoons you spent playing the Stanley Parable, watching your precious youth fritter away hour after hour? We've all wasted our childhoods in one way or another, and you were fortunate enough to get to waste yours on the Stanley Parable. But the Stanley Parable came out years ago, and you're not a child anymore. You're a man, which is like the sequel to a child. And as a man, you want manly things like taxes and cheating at baseball. You need a man's video game, Timmy. And that's why the Stanley Parable 2 will be perfect for you. It's as manly as video games can get. And if you don't believe me, let's look at the burly hunk of a man who's responsible for the game. Here he is, hard at work. His name is Gregory 8-Pack, and he's the cutting picture of raw, virile masculinity. Gregory is what we call the ideas guy, and he has the most important role on the team. The ideas guy tirelessly comes up with interesting concepts and then hands them off to the rest of the developers for the relatively simple job of turning those concepts into reality. For example, he's the one who picked up the phone and declared, "Someone ought to make a sequel to the Stanley Parable." Good work, Gregory. Go ahead and take the rest of the day off. With the hard part out of the way, work on the game can now begin. The game's developers must answer a simple question. What makes a sequel in the first place? Well, it's simple. Sequels are an opportunity to correct the mistakes of their predecessors. We've all made mistakes, and we've all caused harm to someone we love in order to cover up our mistakes. When developing this particular sequel, it's important to start by thinking, what mistakes did the original Stanley Parable make? Well, first off, most of the pornography in the original game was stolen or pirated, and it's time we paid the licensing fees fair and square. Second, the Stanley Parable was catastrophic for this man named Leroy, whose personal information, including home address, social security number, and bank information, were all displayed prominently in multiple locations throughout the game. Although Leroy's money and identity were stolen, the fact remains that his personal information was the emotional core of the game and absolutely vital to a nuanced understanding of the story. As reparation for the harm we caused him, the sequel will contain a brief and insincere apology to Leroy, tucked deep within the game where it will be difficult to find. Finally, the Stanley Parable made the mistake of leaking too many government secrets about the nature of the Time Wars. Without these intricate details of specific military tactics, the story is likely to make very little sense, but we've decided to remove them from the sequel in the interest of helping the state's efforts. We'll get to you yet, Time Dracula. Now then, it's time to set about constructing the Stanley Parable 2. Game development is a difficult and complex art, one which can only be fully understood by this race of hyper-intelligent child soldiers bred in laboratories. They begin by studying the original Stanley Parable. Here it is in its raw, untouched form, a specimen of technological perfection. Time to exploit it for profit. We begin by adding jokes. The Stanley Parable was most widely known for its stark lack of humor, bucking all conventional industry wisdom. It was a bold artist statement that its developers stood firmly behind. But in 2022, it's impossible to reach even a single consumer of video games without jokes of some kind. So very well, jokes it'll be. During its development, over 500 kiloliters of comedy will be funneled directly into the core of the Stanley Parable 2, creating jobs for hundreds of machine operators and producing 30,000 tons of pollutant chemical byproduct, which will be pumped directly into local lakes, rivers, and beautiful nature reserves like these all over the country.
Yeah, this was longer than I thought it was going to be.
The complaint of the Stanley Parable is that there wasn't enough gameplay. And so for the sequel, its developers have gone to great lengths to fix this problem. Here we can see gameplay being printed onto sheets. Every video game contains as many as 1,000 sheets of gameplay, and several of the largest games ever made contain close to 1,500. On mobile devices, the gameplay sheets have to be printed smaller. For the Stanley Parable 2, as many as 35 new gameplay sheets are being printed, each of which must be delicately massaged by the hands of a child before being added into the game. This man is stealing gameplay sheets from the factory, which he likely intends to use for a personal project he's been developing in his spare time. A good public stoning will cure him of that inclination. Let's check on Gregory real quick. Ha! Still recovering from a hard day's work. Don't you move a muscle. Next up, it's time to blackmail the press. In a competitive market, blackmailing your local journalist can be one of the most effective methods of creating word-of-mouth buzz for your sequel. In fact, blackmail is the currency of social progress. From your neighborhood grocer to the teacher at your school to the man who helps you steal HBO, everyone responds to blackmail. And if you've never done it before, it's easy to practice at home on your friends and family. Simply follow the instructional pamphlet that your teacher hands out after the end of the film. And finally, there's one last tool at our disposal for making the sequel feel fresh and exciting, and that's packaging the game with collector's edition merchandise. If you order the Stanley Parable 2, you'll receive this cow's egg. A single egg will produce over 1,000 cows, which are, of course, the sequel to pigs. And there you have it, everything there is to know about producing the Stanley Parable 2. Of course, you may know that there is also a game titled The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. So which game is the true sequel to the Stanley Parable? It's an excellent question, Billy, one which the child soldiers have been working round the clock to come up with an answer to. And after many weeks of diligent research, the conclusion they've reached is, who gives a shit? All that matters is that it's more content for you to cram down your insatiable gullet. You don't want thoughtful and nuanced answers to complex questions, Billy. You just want to eat bubble gum and cheated hopscotch. So get out there and consume. Do your civic duty and bully your parents into buying you every version of the Stanley Parable 2 on every platform. Tell your friends to bully their parents as well. It's through community efforts like these that the world comes together, in harmony and connection. And it's only through this connection that we'll defeat Time Dracula once and for all. Don't let the time-traveling vampires win. Buy the Stanley Parable 2 and pledge to support all sequels.
Yeah.
For today, tomorrow, and into the great unknowable beyond.
Right, I don't know if I can actually put that up, because, like, that's just another YouTube video. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Okay.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
We have a couple more things to test.
Bucket time.
And then we're done.
Stanley clutched the bucket
But yeah.
tightly to his chest. This was not.
So I'm worried about that because it's just 10 minutes of me not doing anything. Like, had I...
That the employee lounge was simply the place to
If I was talking, then I would be fine. But, like, I can't talk during a video.
be correct. Was no, never mind. The bucket was wrong.
Maybe that's why people pause and
Stanley
they
took
do
the door on
those
his
sorts of
left
things.
To go back to the meeting room.
No,
Said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Go to the cargo lift.
Oh, well, look who's got cold feet. Well, from here, it looks like the only way forward is down, since the lift won't be coming back, but that's okay. You've got a bucket. Did you know that buckets are routinely used as cushioning devices? It's true. You can fall on a bucket from literally any height and survive.
Ooh.
Whoops. Looks like I was wrong. How clumsy of me.
Okay, that's basically the same ending. And our final ending.
The meeting room. Yes, that's where everyone would be. Stanley just needed to get to the meeting room, and from then on, it's bucket time.
We are missing the whiteboard ending. And presumably a bucket whiteboard ending? I don't know if there is such a thing as a bucket whiteboard
Stanley
ending.
clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left. Still no one was here. Stanley needed the bucket's warmth and comfort now more than ever. Perhaps, Stanley, we must move on from this broom closet, simply because I have no remaining stickers. Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office. Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Crushed by the weight, but Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck. Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was the bucket guiding him? Yes, this is certainly the most logical explanation.
Oh, hang on. What happens if I go up here? Is there a bucket conference? I didn't consider a bucket conference.
The elevator raced downward, plummeting towards an unknown fate. It would be all Stanley could do to keep himself together, if not for the bucket. Soothing him, comforting him, reassuring that in this darkest moment of uncertainty, he would be all right. The bucket is here for you, Stanley. Everything will be fine. Wait, Stanley said to the bucket. Can we go back up? When I was pressing those keypad buttons, there was something very intriguing about the number 3. I want to go back so I can try pressing the number 3 again. The bucket said nothing.
Cool. I didn't even consider this. I was just going to go to the bottom of the disco again with the bucket. Although, unfortunately, it means we have to go to the left side twice in a row. That's when I should have done the...
Here we are, said Stanley. Now I'm going to try out that number 3 button. He took the bucket over to the keypad and began absolutely slamming on the number 3 over and over and over.
Perhaps the bucket had missed something. Perhaps it had not seen how much joy Stanley got from slamming the number 3 repeatedly. No, said Stanley to the bucket. You can't go on yet. Not till you understand how much the number 3 means to me. You and I have been through so much together, and I just want you to see what I see. Feel the happiness I feel. He smiled at the bucket, and the bucket said nothing. Here we go, said Stanley. This time I'll really show you. He ran to the number 3 and began to wail on it like a musician on a beloved instrument, weaving a concerto of truth and passion. He wielded the number 3 like a fine artist would wield a paintbrush. He told stories through the number 3, stories of his dreams and hopes and fears. And the whole time, he looked to his bucket for a reaction of some kind. Anything to let him know that the bucket appreciated what he was doing. The bucket conveyed absolutely nothing at all, only silence. Crushed by a wave of dejection, Stanley returned to the elevator.
The only thing
Stanley and the bucket were so close. They'd always been there for one another. Why suddenly could the bucket not connect with this passion of Stanley's? The question caused Stanley to ruminate the whole way down the elevator. He knew that there must be a way to get through to the bucket, to communicate fully with his dear friend. Surely there was a solution, mustn't there be?
Silly birds. That's the solution. Silly birds.
Said Stanley. I know what to do. I know how to fully express this feeling in my heart. He decided right then and there that he would hold a press conference where he would speak to the public on all matters relating to pressing the number 3 over and over. He would elaborate fully on what the number 3 meant to him and why he felt so alive when pressing it. Then the bucket would be able to see his joy through the eyes of others. It would get to see the world react to this discovery of Stanley's. And it would be through the public eye that the bucket would finally understand Stanley's work. For months, he advertised and marketed his press conference, building excitement around it, developing and rehearsing it, until it couldn't be refined a single measure further. When the big day arrived, Stanley was as prepared as he'd ever been for anything in his life.
Those aren't the number 3.
One last chance to win the bucket over. One opportunity to share a true connection with a loved one. There was no one here.
Aww.
Nobody had come to the press conference to hear Stanley speak, to listen to him talk about what it really means to press the number 3 on a keypad over and over. He was unloved, uninteresting, he was a failure, and in that moment Stanley knew that the bucket would never again take him seriously. There would be no connection, no deeper understanding. The bucket merely sat there in his arms, indifferent. And so it began that slowly, over many years, the two of them grew more and more distant. They spoke less and less, neither wishing to state the obvious, that any sense of real respect between them had eroded since that day at the press conference. There would be no more games, no more long conversations about passion and pursuit, only a silence that consumed the space between friends. And Stanley, having for once in his life discovered the warmth and comfort of true companionship, was cast back into the unremarkable normalcy of loneliness.
Oh, I don't like this ending. Ba ba da da ba da ba da.
Good morning. Thank you for contacting the Future Happiness Foundation. We are confirming your shipment of 1,327 cardboard boxes to your place of work. Can you verify that this is correct? Excellent. Your order will arrive shortly. Thank you again for contacting the Future Happiness Foundation.
No problem.
It's bucket time.
Right.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
I believe this will be our final ending.
Still no one was here. Stanley needed the bucket's warmth and comfort now more than ever. Perhaps his boss's office was where he'd find answers. Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office. Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Crushed by the weight of this revelation, Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck. Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was the bucket guiding him? Yes, this is certainly the most logical explanation.
Cool. Got a bonus ending. A really sad bonus ending. I don't even know if this will give me an ending. If it doesn't, then I would have already cut it off. So I guess that's a spoiler for you.
Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read, Mind Control Facility. The lights rose on an enormous room packed with... But just as Stanley was about to proceed further into the mind control facility, he tripped and fell over the railing and into the dark void below. Thankfully, he fell directly onto the bucket, which safely cushioned his fall. Now, what to do next, Stanley wondered. Stanley and the bucket could find no way out of this enormous pit, and so eventually they decided that the best thing to do would be to simply get comfortable down here. So they set up a little couch and relaxed. It really wasn't so bad down here, a bit cold perhaps. After some time had gone by, they installed a few shelves as well, and a sort of kitchenette that was useful for when the bucket was craving paninis. But it wasn't until the rugs and the standing lamps came in that it really started to feel like a home. In fact, after some time, Stanley realized that it had been ages since he had even thought of the mind control facility at all. He'd never gotten to fully explore what was up there, never been able to unearth the many mysteries of the mind control facility. This lack of closure began to eat at him. Soon he was dwelling on his regrets, and the state of their home slowly decayed as Stanley became withdrawn and neglected the cleaning. It unsettled the bucket deeply. Stanley wasn't usually like this. The bucket tried to reach out to him again and again, but to no avail. All Stanley could think about, all he could talk about, was going back, doing it over again, staying on the path. It was a mistake to leave the path. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. I need to do what the narrator says. I need to see the true ending. This made no sense at all to the bucket, which was simply trying to live its life down here as comfortably as possible. Yet Stanley was unconsolable. This isn't an ending. This is just a hole in the ground. The bucket sighed. True, it wasn't an ending. But it's where we happen to be. And maybe, possibly, if we accept the reality of things, maybe this will become an ending eventually. It's what the bucket was counting on. The two of them waited for a very long time. But Stanley simply couldn't handle the pressure. What if he had to make a decision?
I've been the John Struct. I've been having a Stanley Parable adventure. The Ultra Deluxe adventure. The Stanley Parable 2 adventure. And I'll see you next time. Thank you. That's not what we're playing. Oh, the button doesn't work. Thank you for watching anyway.
Yeah, well, I just thought that it wasn't acceptable, for to file those reports, and then I just thought that the reports could be a lot better. I thought the reports would make sense. I just thought that with all the delays, they just couldn't get it out. They couldn't get it out to us in time.
I've got my printing schedule down, so it gets to 11:30 and I print the bilateral documents, and that takes 30 seconds max. So then what happens? I go back to the desk after collecting the prints, and I get a sick PDF up. I usually get something down from the send down some PDFs, sick stuff, and I wired it through the system so that I can actually look at it.
Hey, does anybody know where the bathrooms are? Yeah, I just can't find. Yeah, I just can't find any bathroom around the office. If anybody can point me in the right direction, that'd be
Wide window.
through the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. So I was going up to the boss's office to hand in my quarterly reports, and I saw that he has this keypad at the back of his room, and I was thinking, what is that keypad for? And so I went up to it, and he wasn't in, and I thought for a second about typing in some numbers into the keypad, and then I thought that he came in, and the boss came in, and I was like, I've got the quarterly reports for you. I thought,
Initiate a printing operation. I do that by about 12, usually 12. Then I go on lunch, and that's a sad time because I really miss printing. I once brought some of my own printing from home to do over lunch, but I got a call from upstairs saying that I'm using up company ink. That's fair.
Looking around, and I'm pretty sure that there's a rat in the office. Pretty sure there's a little tiny rat in the office running around squeaking. It's driving me nuts. But I'm just really sure that there's some kind of little rat. I left out a little stray piece of cheese, and it's gone. And I know it's not the cleaners picking it up because there's papers all over the office, and there's stray boxes and stray bits of trash, hanging around all around the office. I know it's not the cleaners.
I've been trying to work the copy
I
machine
know,
lately, and it just doesn't seem to be working. It's like there's a tiny little tub of garlic sauce in the coffee machine.
But yeah, anyway, I get off lunch, I do some more prints. Sometimes the printer runs out of ink. Now that's really exciting because that means I have to take a trip down to Third, where I then have to make a call from a very specific phone which connects to
a bit of a headache,
people down in
and I can't really focus on my office work that I'm going to get done. I know you all have, comparatively less stressful jobs than me. That's good for you.
but
garlic sauce.
I've got a much higher
Copy machine.
workload. I've got a lot more
You know, it
tasks
looks
to
like every
do
single copy machine
on the
in the
back
world
end,
seems to have a little
and
tub of
with all
garlic
this
sauce
cross
inside of
talk,
it.
It's just giving me a bit of a headache. So like,
Now,
if you could just
I
keep
just
it down, I would so.
I just think that it's inappropriate that I understand that she's the supervisor. I understand that she has a position of authority in this office, but I just don't think you can talk to people like this. It's really condescending. Um, you know, I've had employee 276 in here the other day crying, just crying his eyes out, saying that she'd just been super rude, and what kind of operation is this where you've got employees crying because the person who's supposed to be an inspiration to you has just been.
And the stapler, boxes, cups, wallpaper.